Johnson & Johnson stock posting its biggest one-day loss since 2002 after a Reuters report that as far back as 1957, the company knew of cancer-causing asbestos in their popular baby powder. Johnson & Johnson firing back with this statement. The Reuters article is one-sided, false, and inflammatory. Simply put, the Reuters story is an absurd conspiracy theory in that it apparently has spanned over 40 years, orchestrated among, and then we'll look at the next one, generations of global regulators, the world's foremost scientists in universities, leading independent labs, and J&J employees themselves. The Dow component was down 10% during Friday's session, racing $40 billion in market cap. Joining us now to talk about J&J's damage control is Dean Crutchfield. He is founder of Crutchfield and Partners, a crisis management firm. Do you know the specifics and the science behind this, Dean, or is this just a generic approach to any type of crisis?
Well, no, this is very different. I mean, they're a very famous company in terms of their ability to handle crisis. They were defined as the poster child for crisis management, and how they handle this could make them the of crisis if they don't handle it well. I mean, they've got a great track record, as you know. They got
Tylenol, right?
Yeah, the Tylenol case in 1982, but that was different. 3 people died. They pulled the product off the shelf because it was tainted. This is something where they're saying, no, there is nothing in that product. So it's a totally opposite approach in terms of the crisis that's, that's confronting them.
This is an old fear. I can remember, I haven't used talc in 20 years. I didn't associate it with asbestos contamination necessarily, but I had seen, I don't know, at least some type of concern that talc itself, the molecular structure.
How's it made? Where it come from?
No, that the talc itself might have been carcinogenic. And I'm not trying to promote a conspiracy theory here, but I didn't know it was about asbestos. What do we know about whether they say it's false and inflammatory? Is there no asbestos in talc? Do you know the specifics of the case?
Well, they're making the case it's pharmaceutical grade talc. So they're actually making the case that it's nothing to do with the more natural element. So they're claiming the fact that that's clearly.
My question is, I mean, these charges go back a long time.
Right.
Some of the emails that were brought up make it look as if it wasn't always pharmaceutical grade talcum powder. What happened in those situations? Was there a cover-up? I mean, obviously, this is decades and decades that have gone by. Their attack that they're taking is that there's nothing wrong with talc. But what I didn't see in that is, was there asbestos in some of this talc at some points in the past?
Well, that's, I think, where they have to be. You know, they've got their crisis team in place. They put out national advertising today in all the broadsheets talking about science, not,
But it doesn't address asbestos.
No, they haven't actually said, do you admit that? And all these documents are showing that there are indications and language.
Therefore, the question, though, is, even if you say it's a 15 or 20 year ago issue, which, by the way, is not
40 years ago.
Or 40 years ago issue. And by the way, there are people suing relating to what was going on.
Yeah.
No, they're not. I mean, they're suing now
for ovarian cancer
based on what had happened 20 years ago. And so the question is, do you ever say, okay, maybe we made some mistakes, or maybe the material was different, or you think you can't even acknowledge that?
Well, at the moment, they're defending their stock price, and typically companies under pressure from a crisis react in an over-analytically way. But what they need to do is respond boldly. So now they put out their ad campaign about science, not sensation. They're actually trying to now create more of a consumer message.
But what bothered me about this campaign is that it doesn't address the real questions. I mean, when I read that, I thought, my gosh, this is so lawyered up. Nobody can look at this and tell me, was there asbestos in your talc in the last 20, 30,
Well, that's
or 40
why
years?
2 key things of crisis management is respond boldly and hide nothing, tell all.
Right.
And I think that last one is where the big fear for J&J, to your point, you haven't admitted anything here. You haven't said any indication that actually, yes, there were issues years ago, there aren't now. But I think the problem there is you can't blame an executive from 20 years ago. The throat to choke on this one's Alex Gorski. So they're protecting the CEO as well. And he hasn't said anything.
But I don't even blame Alex Gorski, but what I want to see is what happened all those decades ago.
Right.
But should Alex Gorski be on television this morning?
Absolutely.
Saying what, though?
He needs to be saying that we're looking into this situation. We take these claims very seriously.
Well, by the way, looking into this, they don't need to be looking into it today. They've been looking into. They've had this lawsuit lying around for years.
Exactly. In crisis, there's a build-up phase, and this build-up phase has been going on potentially for years. So they're well aware of what's happening.
So is $40 billion, that's what the company lost in market cap, is there any way that claims could breach that?
There are comments that they won't. There I saw comments on the week that they're not going to lose $40 billion in litigation, but they've just lost $5 billion on the pelvic mesh thing. They've lost $4.5 billion on the claims of ovarian cancer with the talcum powder. So how much does this add up? There's a long tail here that we're going to find out about in terms of what the real implications are, because the truth will be coming out soon. My biggest word that they've said is conspiracy. I want to learn more about what do you mean by conspiracy, to your point.
Well, I think what they mean by conspiracy was the Johnson & Johnson Foundation. I mean, if you look through what the Times was reporting over the weekend, too, they were kind of saying that the Johnson & Johnson Foundation, which had some former executives on the board, was giving money to Mount Sinai, and that a researcher at Mount Sinai had to withdraw some of what he was saying. But again, the question I have as a consumer is, was there ever asbestos in your talc? Was this a problem at some point? Did the company realize that, and was it covered up years ago?
Have you resolved it? I think there's the thing. Have you resolved this case?
Here's the issue. I mean, here's the complication. Even if you don't believe that there's any possibility of anything in the talc today, right? Mm-hmm. If I told you that there was something potentially in the talc 20 years ago, I'm still not sure you'd buy the talc.
I'm not going to buy the talc, no. And I actually had friends reach out to me, adults, who actually said I still use the product, and they're quite, freaked out about the whole thing. But they'd heard about it. But now this information, this gossip, has become fact. Well, not fact. It's become news, and so
by
it
not
changes
addressing
everything.
it. That's why.
And they're not
and
addressing
then the question is, do you buy nothing that says Johnson & Johnson?
Well, you
right?
start looking at the shampoo.
The shampoo.
Yeah, you stop.
Do you buy the
exactly.
Right? I mean,
there's a huge knock-on effect here, and there's a long tail. Depending on how this crisis is handled right now, we will dictate, which direction it takes.
What happens if they came in and said, you know what, actually, we did know about these claims, which obviously they clearly did know, because there's lots of demonstrable evidence that suggests that. We knew about these claims, we looked at it, we did this, we did this, we did this. We were not trying to cover it up, but this is, there are these competing claims. I mean, if it was murky even, that's not a saleable idea either.
Yeah, the throat to choke here is Gorski, and
so you think that he's losing his job?
I think potentially, yeah, he could, if this gets out of hand. I mean, I think there are
because you think he's been involved in a cover-up, or just because you think he's not responding?
He's accountable.
To this?
He's accountable to this situation that's been going on for years, and he's well aware of these accusations because there's been cases in court already. There's been litigation, so it's just not being handled well. So ultimately, as the boss of the company,
even if it's stuff that didn't happen on his watch at all.
Exactly, it's his responsibility. You're the throat to choke. You're the
American
boss. Where else do I go if I'm a consumer?